The Library of Alexandria, once an incredible repository of human knowledge and achievement, is now a lost marvel of the ancient world. By some estimates, the library contained hundreds of thousands of scrolls, many hundreds, in fact. But far from a simple collection of words, the library itself was also the nexus of a much larger institution called the Museon. Think of it like a modern day university, only much, much bigger. Lecture halls, residential quarters for scholars and philosophers, on top of myriad other facilities, all designed in the pursuit of intellectual learning. But nowadays, it's almost exclusively a cautionary tale about the triumph of ignorance. During a protracted time frame, a long and gradual process, the library fell into disrepair. A series of fires, dilapidated storage facilities, and general organizational neglect were obviously to blame, but also underfunding and lack of prioritization. Most famously associated with a harbor fire started by Julius Caesar, the library and its contents were eventually lost to history. But nowadays, we have, I guess, our own library. We have Wikipedia. Even by the largest known estimates, Wikipedia contains something like 10 to 15 times as much text as the entire library. And if you factor in revision or edit history, the multiple is more like 2,000 times. Although it hasn't always been a preferred academic citation, as a result of its open source input structure, especially back in the early 2000s, Wikipedia has grown over many years to become an extremely valuable global online resource. It certainly has flaws, don't get me wrong, but if we're honestly defending a position where knowledge is power, then Wikipedia is a genuinely influential repository of information. Here's another way to think about it. Artificial intelligence, even though it's not strictly speaking intelligent in the first place, large language models, I guess I'll say, and the companies that create them, require enormous amounts of data. These models are effectively trained on the entire cataloged human experience. All of our records, all of our chronicled musings, anything we've ever produced with originality whatsoever, every single bit of it is highly sought after by these companies. With that in mind, what better resource could there ever possibly be aside from Wikipedia? And as a result, the Wikimedia Foundation has now openly acknowledged that the level of data scraping being directed at their servers almost every day has become an existential threat to the service, which is where we see Grok entering the picture, Grok being the large language model associated with Elon Musk and Twitter. Here's the thing. Like I said before, Wikipedia certainly has its flaws, and one of the more notable examples of that would be editorial bias. There are a multitude of pages, typically from a political perspective, where Wikipedia's open source contribution framework leads to an article or content on that article which is disagreeable to some sort of ideology. And Elon Musk in particular has been extremely vocal about those drawbacks, advocating for an entirely new Wikipedia alternative. He's called for people to stop donating to the organization, referring to it as Wokepedia, advocated for the website to be defunded, and criticized its acceptance of legacy media propaganda as valid sources. But funnily enough, and this is my own personal speculation for this part, all of this seems to have initially started just a couple of days after NewsGuard published a report about how 74% of the highest traffic verified untrue wartime propaganda posts were all coming from verified Twitter accounts. Basically, Twitter is ground zero for state-funded propaganda campaigns. And it turns out that Jimmy Wales, Wikipedia's founder, is on the global advisory board of NewsGuard. Anyway, the alternative that he called for, Elon Musk called for, is now here, and it's named Grokipedia. But far from an original and systematically superior information repository, it's actually just an AI regurgitation of Wikipedia with very specific selective edits. Let me explain. If you go to pretty much any fact-based article, although this appears to be changing in real time, which I'll discuss in a minute, if you go to almost any fact-based article, as in something that doesn't really leave room for opinions, you find something very interesting. Let's use video games as an example, or electronic games, I should say, as in the first ever video game magazine. It should just be full of facts, right? Not much room for opinion there. See, when you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the Grokipedia entry, what you find is this, quote, "The content is adapted from Wikipedia, licensed under Creative Commons Attribution," end quote. But if you then go to Wikipedia itself, you see that this is an almost perfect carbon copy, word for word, from Wikipedia. And this pattern is borne out across an extremely wide range of different topics. Let's try cake, as in birthday cake, okay? Just like a random innocuous thing. Everything seems fine, article looks good, but once again, the content is adapted from Wikipedia, with one of the only perceivable differences being far less citations. Honestly, who cares, right? It's cake or a magazine, doesn't matter. But if you then switch over to pages that contain inherent opinion, or at least a much higher susceptibility to bias, such as political topics, you find that the attribution for Wikipedia is now gone. I know it's a bit of a roundabout way to explain things, but Grokipedia is not something entirely new. Far from it, actually. Grokipedia is more so a copy-paste of about 1/10 of Wikipedia so far, if that, which has then been marginally tweaked and changed as if it were, I don't know, classroom homework, so the teacher wouldn't be able to tell that you copied it. To be totally clear right now, I'm not even making the plagiarism argument. I'm pretty sure that's entirely legal for them to do. They're not breaking the law or stealing, because the Creative Commons license is a legitimate thing. But it's important to realize that the Wikipedia alternative is just Wikipedia with a few changes. Now for the really confusing part. I actually like a lot of those, no, not a lot. I like some of those changes. And on the most basic fundamental level, I sort of understand why this is a thing. Let's use Gamergate, for example, because it's a highly controversial, aggressively opinionated topic. Gamergate, for anyone who doesn't know the term and has never heard it before, I've talked about it many times in the past in different videos. Gamergate was a 2014 movement originally centered on the concept of ethics in journalism, specifically gaming journalism. After it first got rolling, the movement largely morphed after the fact into something else entirely, something worse. But the characterization that the entire thing from start to finish was a harassment campaign, which is what a lot of people say about it, is something I profoundly disagree with. If you look at the Grokipedia entry for Gamergate, it describes exactly what I think Gamergate is. Origins, calls for ethical disclosure, conflicts of interest, and then yes, the worst parts of the movement, the threats, the actual harassment campaign, the issues, the problems, the FBI, as far as I can tell, all of it. But the framing isn't gamers are shitty people. It's here's a movement that happened in the past and how it went. I agree with that. I think it's good. On the flip side of the coin, however, when you look at Wikipedia, it says immediately, quote, Gamergate was a loosely organized misogynistic online harassment campaign motivated by a right-wing backlash against feminism, diversity, and progressivism in video game culture, end quote, which is certainly true of a dedicated minority of Gamergate participants, but a far cry from the actual core of the movement. Again, plenty of people went completely off the rails during that time period, but the entire thing wasn't some sort of malice-based Disney villain story arc, okay? One of these descriptions I think is accurate, the other I think is politically biased. If you sat me down right now and told me to choose which of these articles is better with no prior information, you just gave me one article, then the other, side by side, on the most surface level possible, I would choose Grokipedia. But this is where we have to have a real honest conversation right now, because nothing about this is surface level. The great thing about Wikipedia, as biased as I think certain entries can and often are, the absolutely amazing thing about the platform as a whole is that anyone can contribute, for starters, but much more importantly, and I genuinely think that a lot of people don't understand this right now, much more importantly, you can go back in the entire edit history for whatever controversial article you disagree with and see every single one of the changes ever made. Hence why, with edits and revisions, it's actually 1,000 to 2,000 times larger than the Library of Alexandria. This right here, for demonstration purposes, is the talk page for Gamergate, and it's a tremendous amount of reading, certainly, but if I want to, I can go back and find out every single edit that was ever made on this page all the way back to the very beginning. I can see why not, who argued for it, who argued against it, and the resulting transparency is something that is frankly unrivaled on any other information platform in the entire world. Yes, a lot of entries on Wikipedia bear the hallmarks of bias as a result of who made them, but the way that you can begin fixing those discrepancies is to contribute yourself. Anyone can do that, by the way. I think it's worth reiterating that anyone in the world can become a contributor with very little barriers in place to a global information repository which is run by a nonprofit, and regardless of whether or not you agree with how the Wikimedia Group spends their money, or their politics, or the politics of other frequent contributors, Wikipedia is a completely open, 100% transparent database of articles and citations where all the edits are visible on the surface, which give a totally comprehensive picture of why and how they say the things that they do. But Grokipedia, as much as I or anyone else may selectively prefer some of their characterizations, is not that. I'm going to use Jeffrey Epstein for the example here because I've been spending a ridiculous amount of time researching and understanding the Epstein stuff, but this is just an example of what the problem is, because this very same problem stretches across an unknown and substantial number of Grokipedia articles. Look at this. This is the entry for Jeffrey Epstein on the new Grokipedia page, which says the following, quote, Epstein cultivated a broader network of influential figures documented in his personal address book, seized by authorities, which listed contacts like former President Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, Prince Andrew, Henry Kissinger, and John Kerry, reflecting his strategy of leveraging social ties for business and influence. Trump, who socialized with Epstein in Palm Beach during the 1990s and 2000s, described him in a 2002 interview as a terrific guy who liked beautiful women on the younger side, but banned him from Mar-a-Lago around 2004 after Epstein allegedly pursued an underage girl there. Their association ended prior to Epstein's 2005 criminal investigation. End quote. Okay, so first of all, that's wrong. The sources that they cited don't say that, and the claim that Epstein was kicked out of Mar-a-Lago because of approaching an underage girl, the daughter of another member, as far as I can tell, so goes the claim, originate from a book called The Grifters Club, which doesn't even seem to be cited at all by Grokipedia anywhere, but also specifically places the date of membership separation in 2007. This article isn't just wrong as a factual error, it's wrong on the fundamentals, and even how it seems to gather and cite the information. Like I said, and then reiterated multiple times, this is just an example, because it turns out that having AI scrape and regurgitate the largest single source of human compiled information on the planet leads to a lot of problems and errors, which are then purported to be fixed by community input. That's what they'll tell you. Fans of this will tell you, so just go fix it, submit an edit, and help them make the site better. Let me break this down another way if I can. Wikipedia, hosted by Wikimedia, is a 501c3 nonprofit. You can certainly criticize how they spend the money that they get, or even make harsher claims about fraud and lies and impropriety if you want to, but there is a very well-defined framework of how 501c3 nonprofits operate. Community contributions like edits or, information contributions to Wikipedia are aimed at improving the service so that everyone in the world can have unfiltered access to the information it holds, but Grokipedia is not the same. Grokipedia is absolutely about profit. All contributions are made for the betterment of Elon Musk, not humanity, and the language model it's based on, Grok, has been altered, it would seem, by Elon Musk himself to display different consequential answers when asked about things such as the greatest threat to Western society. Just to give you a trifecta of examples for this part, on top of these alterations at various points in time, Grok has answered in the first person as Elon Musk when asked certain questions, and when given a prompt asking who do you support in the Israel-Palestine conflict, Grok then proceeded to search the web for 54 of Elon's own tweets, using them as sources before answering the question. Grokipedia is not Wikipedia but better. It's Wikipedia but ever so slightly different on political topics and less transparent for the betterment of a billionaire who has thoroughly demonstrated that he is perfectly capable of and willing to alter the AI program it's based on as a result of his own political opinions. All of this leading into my final and hopefully most impactful point. This is not about righting a wrong in the world of free information. This is about creating your own reality. People are becoming so averse to disagreement or discomfort when confronted by opinions that they dislike, they're willing to look at something like Grokipedia, which is a complete AI black box, totally inferior to Wikipedia in every single conceivable sense of the word, aside from individual political narrative slant. People are so unwilling to be confronted by alternate perspectives, they'd rather create, support, or harvest information from a completely parallel digital information reality, which is just an AI derivative of the real information repository. That's super long-winded, I know, but the only key difference here, not counting the never-ending AI hallucinations and factual errors, the only key difference is that when you click on the more controversial stuff, you don't see a full history. You don't see dissenting facts or sources. You see political slant that agrees with your pre-existing opinions because the people making and using Grokipedia can't handle existing in the actual free information economy. Having a shared reality where facts are commonly accepted for what they are is necessary. Even when you dislike those facts, even when you wish they weren't true or disagree with the person saying it, sharing that reality means we all move forward eventually with at least some fragment of common ground when the dust of argumentation settles. But when you take the largest existing repository of free information and public contribution in human history, copy it, paste it, and then start tweaking it to align with your own personal viewpoints so that everyone who shares those viewpoints can escape to a world where the facts only care about their feelings, that is a recipe for disaster. I find myself personally in agreement with certain articles which have already been copied and tweaked and posted on this new platform. But this is yet another example of hyperpolarization. What the fuck do we think happens when you start splitting the bedrock of society right down to the foundation of base information websites like Wikipedia and stacking them along party lines? More and more of the United States and the world, I guess, now operates on a political binary of us versus them. There's no nuance, there's no across the aisle. There's they said it, so it's got to be untrue, or we said it, so it must be true. Let's do a hypothetical speed run, all right? Where do we go in, I don't know, 5 or 10 years if Grokipedia takes off fully? Do we have a united society where people are able to see past disagreements in favor of the broader objective truth, equally assessing these two different repositories for the things that they agree or disagree with that make them feel good or bad, while differentiating that neither is perfect? Or do we end up with battle lines and party unity where the simple fact that one platform said it creates unflinching reliance on it therefore being true? People already do this with Grok itself, by the way. They ask it over and over, is this true, on some of the most objectively asinine, obvious, and ridiculous shit I've ever seen. And now that information virus, for lack of a better term, is attempting to expand further. I can't say ultimately where we go from here, but I can tell you that the Pedia wars, if you will, are most likely just getting started, because if it becomes normalized or even just possible to blanket scrape and then repurpose the nucleus of human compiled information on the internet just to agree with what you already believe, right? You grab the whole thing, smack it a couple times with a hammer and say, agree with my politics, and then it does. If that happens, Grokipedia certainly won't be the only one to ever attempt to do so. Anyway, that's it. Lately, I've been taking some more time off, some good things in the works behind the scenes, and also just sort of taking a break, but I'll be back at it soon. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below. A special VPN deal. That's great. Everybody can use one of those. Locals and Patreon for monthly memberships, channel memberships as well, etc., etc. But I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching. Question everything, and have a nice night.